In 60 seconds, Jaguar deleted 75 years. No cars, no engines, no century of British craftsmanship, just androgynous models draped in abstract colour, a camera drifting through landscapes that resembled nothing the brand had ever built, and a tagline no loyal customer could explain to their neighbour. Then Elon Musk posted 4 words publicly, and it became the most damaging piece of automotive criticism in a decade. He wrote, "Do you sell cars?" 5 months later, the answer arrived in the data. 49 vehicles, across an entire continent, in a single month. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association confirmed that Jaguar registered just 49 vehicles across all of Europe in April 2025, down from 1,961 in the same month the prior year. That is a 97.5% collapse. Year-to-date, January through April 2025 came in at just 2,665 units. Globally, across the full fiscal year ending March 2025, the brand sold 26,862 vehicles. In 2018, it had sold 180,833. That is an 85% decline across 7 years, and the steepest single-brand sales collapse any premium automaker has recorded in the modern era. This is the story of how a brand with a leaping cat on its bonnet and an 80-year emotional grip on its buyers chose to light itself on fire. We will trace the financial desperation that forced the decision, examine why a strategy designed to chase Bentley customers became a textbook case of corporate recklessness, and determine whether anything survives long enough for 2026 to matter. But before we reach the inferno, you need to understand exactly what was burning. Jaguar did not begin as a luxury brand. It began in 1922 in the hands of 2 motorcycle enthusiasts, William Walmsley and William Lyons, who were building stylish sidecars for people who wanted something better than what the market offered. That instinct to build something beautiful that competitors refused to make would define the company for the next century. By 1935, the name Jaguar appeared on a vehicle for the first time. In 1945, the company shed its SS Cars identity to avoid a post-war association with Nazi insignia, and that same year, the famous leaping cat appeared on the bonnet for the first time. It was not merely a logo, it was a covenant between the brand and the road. The cat said, "This machine is fast, it looks extraordinary, and it was made in Britain." The E-Type, launched in 1961, sealed the legend permanently. Enzo Ferrari reportedly called it the most beautiful car ever made. The British government used it as a symbol of national engineering ambition. You did not simply purchase a Jaguar, you inherited a posture, a quiet confidence that required no explanation to anyone who understood cars. That kind of brand equity does not arrive from a campaign budget. It accumulates across generations. People who drove Jaguars in the 1970s passed the preference to their children. E-Types at classic auctions were clearing £200,000 in 2024 as though the world had never moved on. The leaping cat was not a piece of marketing. It was a belief system held by a very specific kind of buyer, and the executives who would later erase it understood exactly what it was worth, which makes what they chose to do next far more deliberate than anyone outside that boardroom wanted to admit. Here is the number the boardroom could not escape. Jaguar, as a standalone brand within the JLR group, was selling roughly 67,000 vehicles annually at its low point, and not one of those sales was generating meaningful profit. In an industry where margins are won through volume or through premium pricing, Jaguar was trapped between the two. Too expensive for genuine volume buyers, too common for genuine ultra-premium buyers. The brand had drifted into a dead zone where production costs consumed whatever the sales price could recover. JLR's financial reports told the broader story. While the group as a whole returned to health, with full-year profit before tax reaching £2.2 billion for fiscal 2024, the highest since 2015, the recovery was built entirely on the backs of Range Rover and Defender. Jaguar's aging sedans and crossovers were passengers on that financial turnaround, not contributors to it. The F-Pace, E-Pace and XF were competing in a segment being aggressively owned by BMW's 3 and 5 Series and Mercedes C&E class. The reimagine strategy was the answer to a single question. If we cannot win the middle, why are we in the middle? The plan was to halt all current production, retire the entire lineup, absorb a 12 to 18-month revenue gap, and relaunch as an all-electric ultra-luxury brand competing directly with Bentley and Rolls-Royce. It was either visionary or suicidal. The financial reality left the executives believing they had no other choice. If this kind of deep-dive analysis is useful, subscribing takes 2 seconds. There is significantly more ground to cover here, and you will not want to miss what comes next. Because the financial desperation was only the beginning. The real question is what a boardroom full of experienced executives decided to do about it. The strategic logic on paper was not entirely without foundation. Bentley's average transaction price in 2024 hovered around $230,000. Rolls-Royce regularly cleared $400,000 per vehicle. The margin differential between selling 67,000 mid-luxury cars and 8,000 ultra-luxury cars was enormous. Fewer vehicles, vastly higher prices, and the kind of brand perception that insulates a company from commodity pricing pressure altogether. The executives looked at those numbers and decided Jaguar could make the leap. Jaguar's managing director Rawdon Glover made the position explicit, stating publicly that only 15% of current buyers were expected to return when the new electric lineup arrived. The brand was not trying to retain its audience, it was attempting to trade it in for a wealthier one. The problem was physics. Brand positioning does not teleport. Bentley's current customers are not buying a car. They are paying for decades of association with royalty, motorsport heritage, and old money. That credibility compounds over generations the same way Jaguar's own had. The idea that buyers who viewed Jaguar as a mid-range British alternative to BMW would suddenly pay £200,000 for a Jaguar EV simply because a marketing department announced a fresh identity was not a strategy. It was a hypothesis with no evidence. The executives had financial data to justify the pivot. What they did not have was the cultural authority to execute it. And the gap between those two things was about to become very visible, very publicly, and with extraordinary speed. The first step was one of the most psychologically damaging decisions any legacy brand has made in the digital era. On November 18, 2024, Jaguar deleted its entire social media history. Years of posts, customer interactions, and brand heritage content, all gone. Not an archive, not a reset. A full erasure across every platform, as though the previous century of manufacturing had been something to conceal before the new guests arrived. The behavioural psychology of this decision deserves attention. When a brand publicly destroys its own archive, it does not signal confidence in its future. It signals shame about its past. Existing customers, people who had purchased 3 or 4 Jaguars across a lifetime, logged on to find that the brand had quietly declared their purchasing history was something to be erased rather than celebrated. The implicit message was that the people who had sustained the company for decades were now an obstacle to the people the company wanted to attract. Consumer psychology research is consistent on this point. Brand loyalty operates on the logic of reciprocity. Customers invest emotionally in companies they believe have invested in them. When that reciprocal relationship is severed without acknowledgement, the response is not indifference, it is betrayal. And betrayed customers do not simply leave quietly. They become critics, and in the social media era they broadcast their exit. The company then had 2 weeks before its next major public statement. 2 weeks to demonstrate that the erasure was the beginning of something extraordinary, rather than the opening act of a corporate collapse. What they produced in those 2 weeks would bring the most powerful man in the world to their digital doorstep, and he would not be coming to applaud. The copy-nothing advertisement was 30 seconds long, and reached 110 million people within 48 hours of its release. No other automotive advertisement in recent memory had achieved that distribution speed. But the reach was not driven by admiration. It was driven by confusion, then mockery, then outrage, supplied primarily by people who had never owned a Jaguar and never intended to. The commercial featured diverse models in vibrant avant-garde outfits, but notably no cars. It introduced a modernized logo, a new typeface blending upper and lowercase letters, and the slogan, "Copy Nothing." The historic growler emblem was gone. The leaping cat was absent. The 30-second window that should have introduced the next era of British luxury engineering instead introduced an identity that communicated nothing about engineering at all. Elon Musk posted, "Do you sell cars?" on X, and the reply became one of the most shared automotive moments of the year. His post redirected millions of viewers toward Jaguar's content, who had no prior context for what they were watching, which only deepened the impression of a brand that had lost its own thread. The deeper failure was structural. Advertising psychology distinguishes between attention and desire. Attention is easy to buy. A car-free advert featuring avant-garde models will generate attention at scale. Desire requires a reason to want the product. The Copy Nothing campaign generated 110 million impressions of a brand that had simultaneously stopped telling people what it sold at the exact moment it needed new customers to understand what it was offering. The impression was made, the product was absent. 2 weeks after the social media deletion and the car-free advertisement, Jaguar unveiled the Type 00 concept at Miami Art Week on December 2nd, 2024. The design arrived in two colorways, Miami Pink and London Blue. The setting was deliberate. Miami Art Week attracts collectors, gallerists, and the ultra-wealthy cultural figures the brand was targeting. The choice of venue sent an unmistakable message. Jaguar was no longer positioning itself as an automotive company. It was positioning itself as a luxury object, like a private commission or a sculpture. The reaction online was immediate and severe. Comparisons ranged from the Pink Panther to Barbie's dream car. Even Elon Musk and EV maker Lucid Motors joined in mocking the concept. Critics noted that the angular, high-bodied design bore no lineage to any Jaguar that had ever won a race or turned a head on a European street. One commenter wrote that 0000 is how many you'll sell. The internet had made its verdict before the car had driven a single kilometre. The fatal disconnect ran deeper than aesthetics. The buyers Jaguar was targeting, the £200,000 customers who choose Bentley and Rolls-Royce, do not select their cars at art fairs. They select them through private client relationships built over decades on the foundation of a marque's proven engineering and cultural standing. Jaguar had none of that credibility in the ultra-luxury space. The Type 00 was not a credibility signal. It was a fashion statement from a brand that had just declared its own wardrobe obsolete. The world now had the logo, the advertisement, and the concept car. One number remained, and it would arrive in April. The April 2025 figures from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association were not a forecast. They were a verdict. Jaguar registered just 49 vehicles across all of Europe in a single calendar month. The prior April had produced 1,961 registrations. The decline was 97.5%. To put that number in its full context, in the same month, BMW, Mercedes-Benz and Audi each registered between 50,000 and 75,000 units across Europe. A single BMW dealership in a mid-sized German city was moving more metal in a week than Jaguar managed across an entire continent in 30 days. Year-to-date figures from January to April 2025 totaled 2,665 units across Europe, down more than 75% from the same period in 2024. The XE and XF sedans were gone, the F-Type sports car was gone, the E-Pace and I-Pace crossovers were gone. Dealers had almost nothing to show a customer who walked through the door. The production explanation was real. Jaguar had deliberately wound down its legacy petrol lineup to clear the runway for its electric vehicles. But the explanation did not survive contact with the competitive data. Every other brand that had navigated an EV transition had done so while maintaining product continuity for buyers. Jaguar's decision to retire every existing model before a single replacement arrived was without precedent in the modern luxury segment. The production line had gone quiet. The showrooms were bare. The only thing left to sell was a concept car. The internet had spent 5 months comparing it to a toy. The executives who had signed off on those decisions were about to face the consequences. BMW did not erase its heritage in 2024, it added to it. The Munich manufacturer grew its fully electric vehicle deliveries by 13.5% in the 2024 fiscal year, reaching 368,523 electric vehicles globally. By the first quarter of 2025, its electric sales had accelerated to 32.4% growth year-on-year, reaching 109,516 battery electric vehicles in the quarter alone. The method was the opposite of Jaguar's. The i4 sat beside the 4 Series. The i5 sat beside the 5 Series. The fully electric E7 was offered as an alternative to the same buyer, already considering the standard 7 Series. The combustion customer was never told their preference was wrong. They were told a better version of what they already wanted was now available. The buyer had continuity, the dealer had product, and the brand had revenue throughout the transition. In Europe, by the end of 2025, battery electric vehicles represented roughly 1/4 of BMW's total European sales. When plug-in hybrids were included, electrified vehicles exceeded 40% of sales in several major markets. This was accomplished without a single press release announcing that existing customers were no longer welcome. Mercedes applied the same logic. Porsche applied it. Even Audi, which faced its own pressures, kept its showrooms populated throughout the transition. The lesson was not that electric vehicles are difficult to sell. The lesson was that trust between a brand and its buyers cannot be suspended while a company reinvents itself behind closed doors. BMW understood that. Mercedes understood that. Jaguar's leadership looked at that conventional wisdom and decided the established approach was beneath them. That judgment had a very human price tag. The corporate reckoning arrived in stages. Adrian Mardell announced plans to step down as CEO and retire in August 2025 after running the company for approximately 3 years. His predecessor, Thierry Bolloré, had also left after 2 years. The revolving door at the top of JLR had become the story within the story. In November 2025, PB Balaji, formerly the chief financial officer of Tata Motors, assumed the CEO role, succeeding Mardell after a structured transition. Sending the group's finance chief to replace the architect of a 97.5% sales collapse was not a subtle signal. The creative era was finished. The accountants had arrived. Within weeks, design chief Jerry McGovern, the architect of the Type 00 concept and the driving force behind the Copy Nothing campaign, departed the company. Sources reported he was escorted out of the office and that his position was eliminated immediately. After 21 years at JLR, during which he had shaped the Defender, the Range Rover Evoque, and the Velar into genuinely successful products, his exit carried the abruptness typically reserved for something far more serious than a failed rebrand. Jaguar also placed its global creative account under review. The account had been held by Accenture Song since 2021, with a contract running until mid-2026. The agency that designed the deletion was being deleted. As of 2026, Jaguar's first electric GT, priced around $130,000, is being prepared for launch, a price point that demands the ultra-luxury credibility the brand has not yet rebuilt. The production line is restarting. The showrooms remain largely empty. The leaping cat sits on the bonnet of a brand that is either about to take off or about to hit the ground. History will record which one it was. If you made it to the end of this video, the subscribe button is right there. Every analysis on this channel runs this deep, and the next one is already in production. Do not miss it.